For the next issue of my Captain America fanzine, Cap Fan, issue number 2, which I hope to put out sometime this month, I plan to have an article in it titled In Defense of Team America, um, which is a spin off series that lasted 12 issues around 1982. Um, it was based on a toy, a little, Evil Knievel type um, toy. And Marvel got the rights to put out a comic about it, and so they kind of created these characters. I think it was Ideal or Hasbro or one of these companies that they did it for. The point of the article and the point of this video, which I decided to do today, is to sort of gather my thoughts as I prepare to write this article, is that I love this series, Team America. I had a subscription to it as a kid as well as Captain America at the time. But it kind of disturbs me when I go online. Whenever you come across a mention of Team America on the internet, people hate it. They are trashing the series, or they'll just dismiss it as a stupid joke, as if it wasn't even worth doing. Whereas that's kind of blows my mind, because for me, Team America, it was sort of like my Fantastic Four in a way. People talk about the Fantastic Four when it first came on the scene, those early issues. And in a way, Team America felt like my Fantastic Four. It was something I was able to follow from issue number 1. And as we'll see, it had little backup features like the early Fantastic Four issues did, about like how Johnny Storm's flame works and things like that. Well, in here you would have little backup things about how motorcycles work. I think one of the problems that some Marvel fans have is it's not really a superhero comic per se. They do have these colorful costumes, but they aren't really fighting villains and stuff. And when they did kind of fight villains, that to me was sort of less interesting. Anyways, we'll very briefly go through the history of Team America. Now, I had a subscription to Captain America, as I say, when this issue came out. Captain America number 269 came out it's cover dated May 1982. And the YouTuber Comic Tropes has done a whole video about the series, and he said that the writer J.M. DeMatteis, or however his last name is pronounced, had said that it was mandated by Marvel that he include the Team America in this issue, to sort of as Captain America as their launch, which was a good idea, because as soon as I read it, as a faithful Captain America reader at the time, I was like, oh, I got to start getting Team America too. Now, these are the 3 main characters that were introduced, and I think it was a very good idea that they had to introduce just 3 characters first, even though there would be a team of 5 characters. So there's Wolf, the El Lobo guy, Are You Ready, and Honcho are the 3 main guys. Then there would be added a character called Cowboy and another character called Wrench. They would be introduced in issue number 2 of Team America. So you see, this is cover dated May 1982, and then the very next month they got their own series, June 1982. Apparently Frank Miller did the design for this, although it's credited to Bob Layton, because apparently he did the pencils and inks. But it presents the origin of Team America. Now, this is written by Jim Shooter, who was editor-in-chief of Marvel at the time. And so it's kind of very wordy. You can see here there's like 4 tiers of panels per page, which is kind of a bit unusual and a bit much. You can see here as well. It doesn't really take advantage of the medium. Again, you have so many, like almost all of these pages have 4 tiers or more per page, which is a lot. But at the time, I didn't mind. This is how comics looked under Jim Shooter. Finally, you have one page that has only 3 tiers. But anyways, it introduces the characters. There's no real superheroing going on, and there's even a coloring mistake in this panel, which was later referenced in the letters page of a later issue, where they colored the characters wrong. This is supposed to be "Are you ready?" and Hancho is supposed to be coming up with the white, but they got them reversed. But anyways, well, then you finally have this thing. Hydra was introduced as their sort of main adversary at first, and because Hancho is like an ex-CIA agent, and so that adds sort of intrigue into the thing. And the whole thing, which I didn't mention, was Marauder is the character here that was sort of the mystery character, who also had showed up in the Captain America issue as well. Who is the Marauder was the mystery about it. Now, that may have been an unfortunate thing to do, because then you had the letters pages filled with people saying, I know who the Marauder is, because one of the members would be missing when the Marauder appears, but it would always be a different member. So people would naturally think, well, it must be something where they are, the Marauder appears when, one of them becomes the Marauder, or they merge somehow. There's some sort of supernatural thing happening, and this Marauder figure appears. Basically, the readers got it right, if not exactly. And so it wasn't much of a mystery. But then it became sort of like, well, okay, if the readership really knows what the answer to the mystery is already, why even have this comic after a while? I think that was probably editorial's viewpoint after a while. It was like, okay, what's the point? There's nowhere else we can really go with this. The readers have already figured it out. But to me, that whole thing wasn't a big deal. I wasn't reading it to figure out who the Marauder was. I was just enjoying it as a story. And it's one of those things where I think, and here, by the way, is where Wrench is introduced, and his wife, Georgiana, or girlfriend, I can't remember. And this was also written, I think, by Jim Shooter. Or actually, it was written by like 3 different writers: Jim Shooter, Denny O'Neil, and Bill Mantlo. I was enjoying this for just the pleasure of reading this story. It didn't matter to me that it was not a superhero comic, because this was sort of the period where I was discovering, I was like 11 years old when this came out, and gradually within the next year or two, I started branching out beyond superheroes, and something like this. And I was also getting into old superhero comics as well, and sort of the pre-Marvel monster stories and Charlton comics and things like that. So this was right up my alley. I was also reading Cartoons Magazine at the time, which was sort of a mad magazine, but about automotive humor, even though I'm not an auto fan. Oh, and you see G.I. Joe #1 came out around the same time. The funny thing is I never bought an issue of G.I. Joe, ever, I don't think. And I certainly didn't buy it at the time, which was kind of odd, looking back in retrospect, that I was such a big fan of Team America. Like I said, I got a subscription to it. I think number 3 or 4 was the first issue of my subscription when it started. But it's kind of odd, isn't it, that I never bought G.I. Joe, even though it's also like you would think it's sort of in the same vein, licensed patriotic property. Here's another ad for it. But I wasn't interested, I guess. Maybe because this was just maybe a little too much more like a superhero comic. This was still... Now, there's Cowboy, by the way. Now, this was my least favorite issue of Team America, because this is more of a superhero type thing, and where they fight supervillains, these guys. And I think Comic Tropes, when he did the review of it, he sort of recommended this issue. I thought, that's odd, because it's my least favorite issue. This one's written by Bill Mantlo, drawn by Luke McDonnell, who was drawing Iron Man, I think, at that time. I kind of this character here, Mr. Magic, just from the look of him, for some reason I associated him with, is it Mr. Miracle, the character that's in Fantastic Four #3, back in 1962. It's sort of a magical type character. And so for some reason I associated this character with that character. But again, it felt like, to me, this was like my Fantastic Four. I was following it from the very first issue. And again, like I said, this has a little more of a superheroic aspect to it. And so I wasn't as keen on this one growing up. But here's another thing where it had these ads like this, and there'll be ads like this further on in the run, where it would show, covers of current comics, like G.I. Joe issue number 2 here. I had a subscription to Amazing Spider-Man at this time as well, and I bought this issue of Peter Parker's Spectacular Spider-Man, which is like the second appearance of Cloak and Dagger or something like that, maybe the third appearance. I bought that when it came out at the local 7-Eleven or whatever. But this reminded me of the old Marvel comics where they'd have ads like this, 4 more Marvel masterpieces or whatever, and show like, sometimes it'd just be like two covers or 3 covers. But that reminded me of old time Marvel, classic Marvel. And then you had this as well, Marvel Masterwork pinups, and that, again, that reminded me of the old Fantastic Four comics where they'd have like a pinup or, Reed, or a pinup of Sue, and so on. And then you have a 2-page letter page, like a lot of the old 1960s Marvel comics would have 2-page letter pages. So anyways, that gave me a sort of old-time feel. And this one focuses, and now these next few issues, like, how it says the Marauder battles alone, each of these issues is going to focus on an individual character. So you kind of get a sort of a solo story. Which wasn't that unusual. I also had a subscription to Alpha Flight around this time. Maybe, I'm not sure what year it started, but it might have started in like 83. But, which also in the beginning of Alpha Flight's run, it would have like issue number 4 would focus on Puck. Issue number 5 would focus on Snowbird and things like that, where it would just kind of have solo stories for the first several issues. And this one was a video game one, which again, Comic Tropes, I think, had recommended this one, or at least said, check it out, it's bonkers. But I didn't think it was bonkers because it was very typical of these 1980s stories where they would have things with arcades and stuff. There would be, here's another one of those ads, by the way. And again, this was part of my subscription, although I didn't buy any of these other ones at the time. The arcade storylines were common, they'd be issues of like, or even like Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, there was like a episode where it was like some video arcade menace, so this one is like these criminals using arcade games where, and this Hercules comic I bought at the time, issue number 1. So it wasn't that crazy. I didn't think it was that bonkers. It was sort of fit the times that you would have these arcade game storylines where some menace was involving in that. And then you have at the end here more Marvel Masterwork pinups. And there's Honcho and there's Cowboy. So again, pretty cool, I thought. And these came in the mail. It was like they would have like a little brown sleeve, paper sleeve that you would just pull off. It's a wonder to me that they didn't slip out, in transit. And so this issue focuses on Honcho, Bill Mantlo writing, Alan Kupperberg drawing. Vince Colletta inked a lot of these. Oh, you can see there's a tear in my copy. I wonder how that happened. It might have been a manufacturer issue. It might have been that way since the beginning. Oh yeah, you can see it. This must be like some sort of defective manufacturer thing, because the black part somehow got attached. But anyway, sort of thing I didn't even notice when I was like 11 or 12 years old. So this one focuses on Honcho, has some sort of, CIA intrigue to it. There was nothing spectacular about these issues, but I enjoyed them, Again, here's another one of those ads. Sort of reinforcing the idea of like this being like a classic Marvel comic from the early 60s. And another letter page, and then let's see if we have more Marvel Masterworks pinups or whatever at the yeah, here's a Marvel Masterwork pinup of Marauder, and then here's one of Wrench. All right, so now we go to issue number 6. This one focuses on Are You Ready? And sort of a similar type thing. Again, same creative team. And like I said, I really enjoyed these as a kid, and looking through them again, I this is a cool ad for the Epic Comics. Looking through them again before doing this video a few days ago, I just thought, I think these are still enjoyable. This is as enjoyable, I think, as like pretty much any early 1980s Marvel comic. This was sort of the style, but even more so, there was like a cartoon called Devlin back in the early 70s, which I would see in reruns in the early 80s. Sort of the idea of each episode, each issue being its own story, a standalone story where the person would solve some menace, and then that would be the end. I was used to that. I enjoyed that, but apparently I think maybe some people were kind of like, oh, what's the point of this? Blah, 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 well, how come they don't have, for some reason they just didn't like this comic where it's like, okay, if you didn't like this comic, I have a hard time understanding why you would like really almost any early 90s or early 80s Marvel comic or any, early 80s comic, because a lot of these were, had that, unless it's maybe the lack of superhero stuff going on. In that case, the comic's not for you, Anyways, I enjoyed this. They have the Honcho's racing hints that I had mentioned earlier, where it's sort of, I like the fact that it's aimed not at comic book fans, but it's aimed at the general reader. That was the thing I liked about Cartoons Magazine. That's the thing I liked about Charlton Ghost Comics, and things like that. They're not aimed at fandom. They're aimed at people who are not necessarily interested in the Marvel universe. They're interested in a motorcycle comic. Now, I have heard some people complain that the motorcycles as drawn in these comics was not that great. But I'm not a motorcycle expert. I personally was just interested in reading them because they were different, and they were very approachable, I mean, something like this, just from the first page, it looks interesting to me, and it's not the sort of thing like that you've seen a million times where, Spider-Man swinging through the city again. It's something different. And it looked like an intelligent story. There's a lot of story going on here, a lot of writing, a lot of things to read. And on the other hand, here's another one of those ads. These ads are awesome. It's just, it was kind of like a cartoon show, but written at a more intelligent level. Well, here's an ad for the Avengers when Captain Marvel was about to join the group, but hadn't been introduced yet. So this would have been around issue number 225 of Avengers. And I was also very much enjoying Avengers during this time, which Jim Shooter had been writing. And again, a lot of people don't like that second tenure of Jim Shooter during the whole Yellow Jacket trial and all that. When he, the whole thing that he did to Yellow Jacket. A lot of people don't like those comics, but to me, those are some of my favorite Avengers comics. Here's more of those Honcho's hints. And again, to me, this is awesome. It's also another thing why I like Archie comics, is because, again, they're not, for the most part, not aimed at comic book fans. And so most comic book fans who are interested in superheroes and so forth are not going to be interested in something like this. But to me, I found this interesting. All right. So after all these solo issues that we had, we finally get back to brass tacks with a team adventure. And sometimes you would have, I liked covers like this where it would sort of have, all these different scenes from inside the comic. Truly, this issue has it all. So issue number 8 is the return of Jim Shooter to writer, or at least plotter, it looks like, and Don Perlin drawing it. And so it felt like an exciting issue, like, oh, something's going to happen now. Now everybody's back together. We're not doing a solo thing. In a way, it was sort of uneven because Honcho sort of disappears on this mission that we don't really get to see. So he's gone, and there's some subplots going on, and so forth. Jim Shooter adding a lot of that. Now here's the bit where we see Honcho in his mission. He gets hit over the head, but then we never really see him after that. He shows up, bruised, but we don't really know what the mission was, what that was all about. So that felt like a bit of a lost opportunity. Like, was that important? Is it going to be referenced again? So that felt a little bit uneven. But on the other hand, this felt like, something is exciting. It felt like an exciting issue when this came out. There's another exciting issue. Team America meets Iron Man. Well, actually, he's sort of just a cameo in here. Mark Bright drawing it, who was doing, well, I'm not sure if he was doing Power Man and Iron Fist yet at this point. He might have been, not sure if he was drawing Thor at this point too. Anyways, a good artist. And let's see, Jim Shooter also doing the plot on this one. But yeah, there wasn't too much to this issue. It felt sort of like a placeholder issue, but you did have Iron Man at the end of it, very, very briefly, and not much happens. But again, I didn't really even notice that until watching the Comic Tropes video, and he's kind of like, oh, Iron Man just shows up and doesn't really do anything. Well, I hadn't really thought about that at the time. I just noticed, hey, it's an Iron Man appearance. And issue number 10 is another standalone story. By the way, this one has those tattoos samples that also came in Amazing Spider-Man number 238, the first appearance of the Hobgoblin, which I also had gotten. I had a subscription of that too. So if you ever need one of those things to go into if your Amazing Spider-Man 238 is missing one of these things, you might be able to just get a Team America 10. Insert it. I don't know. I've not tried that, but anyways, this was like about a cult leader type one who turns people to dust, written by Stephen Grant. And again, I thought this was an enjoyable issue. It's like it felt a bit adult. Like I said, I was like about 11 or 12 at the time, and so it felt like a mature storyline. You have a villain, but he's not like a super villain. Here's an ad for New Mutants, in their graphic novel. And then he meets his own fate when he opens up the letter and turns to dust. Anyways, I enjoyed it. And then finally, last two issues. A lot of people comment on Ghost Rider. They had always wanted Team America to meet up with Ghost Rider. And again, I think the Comic Tropes video about this was kind of noting that Ghost Rider doesn't really do much of anything in here. This was drawn by Dave Simons, who has a different art style. And I do admit that at the time when this came out, I found it a little off-putting in a way, because it was drawn in such a different style than the, Vince Colletta, inked style that I was used to. Has more of a quirkier style, something like I would have seen like in Mad Magazine or something like that. A Mort Drucker type look to it. But on the other hand, I warmed up to it very quickly, especially after issue number 12. This stuff with this character here, I didn't really pay attention to it until there was more focus on her in the next issue. So we have Ghost Rider show up. He had also showed up in Avengers, like 211 or something like that, a year or so earlier. I didn't buy Ghost Rider at the time, so my only exposure to Ghost Rider back then was whenever he would appear in somebody else's comic. And then the next issue, The Secret Origin of the Marauder, plus the end of Team America. Now, I didn't notice that at the time, here you see Marauder and he takes off his hood. I didn't realize, it never occurred to me that they would cancel Team America. So this was a double-side issue. Now the thing is, I'm not sure if I did this for this issue or not, but just to create variety, when I had a subscription back then, I was so used to getting issues that just to create variety for myself, at one point, when I got the issue in the mail, it was covered with the brown paper sleeve with the mailing label on it. I would turn the comic over and pull the sleeve off and then read the comic without looking at the cover. Not sure if I did that with this one or not. I know I did it with an issue of Amazing Spider-Man. And so it's possible I did this with this one, did the same thing with this one, and did not look at the cover until I was done reading the issue, where it actually says double-sided last issue. So either I did it that way and I didn't realize it was the last issue until I finally finished reading it, or it could be a case where I just opened up the sleeve, and then when I saw double-sided last issue, I was stunned in disbelief. What? They're canceled because you demanded it at the end of Team America? I was stunned that it was being canceled. It is a double-sided issue, though, so that was cool. But anyways, this was one of the best issues of the run, written by Jim Shooter. It's hard to see there, though. The credits are so tiny. Don Perlin drawing it. Vince Colletta inking it. And it reveals Georgiana as the Marauder, but it turns out that basically, is like a lot of fans speculated, whoever needed to be the Marauder at that time would become the Marauder, because their energies or whatever would cause the Marauder to be created. Anyways, this was a very good issue. And it kind of humanized Hydra, the people working for Hydra. We could see that some of them were just victims too. Team America shows up, saves the day. And then this is kind of, people still talk about this online too, this editorial by Jim Shooter, where he basically says we're canceling Team America because it's, not worthy of respect. At least not as much as Daredevil and X-Men and things like that. Doesn't, Team America deserve the same respect as Frank Miller's Daredevil, which, when it wasn't selling as well originally? Isn't it an artistic success? I don't think so. So, which I found odd, because he had written so many of these issues, or at least plotted a lot of them too. And sometimes I think the people working at Marvel and so forth, I think they may not understand how some fans, well, maybe they do, but maybe it's just not enough fans appreciate this stuff. Like I said, for me, this was my Fantastic Four, it was, something that really inspired me. So much so, in fact, these sequences are great. Whenever I look at them still, I feel the same excitement that I felt reading them when I was 11 or 12 years old. They're very action-packed right here. Wolf was sort of like a Wolverine type character, and so it seems strange to me that they would squander that potential and just think, oh yeah, we don't like it, or we're not into, superhero fans aren't into it, so let's just cancel it. This is, to me, it was a series that had a lot of promise and potential, even beyond the mystery aspect. So the Marauder rides off into the distance. Apart from the mystery, that was, to me, that wasn't the whole point of Team America. Once the mystery was solved, I expected the series to keep going, but that wasn't to be. I did buy New Mutants number 5 and 6, which had mentions, in fact, in Shooter's editorial there, that they would be Team America would be appearing in there. And they started referring to the Marauder as like the Black Marauder or something, or Dark Marauder or something like that. But then eventually Marvel lost the license, to Team America, was no longer involved with the company that was doing it. In fact, here's the fine print. Let's see if I can find out. Team America and Marauder are trademarks of Ideal Toy Corporation. That's what it says. So once Marvel is no longer licensing the name Team America from Ideal, then they couldn't do Team America and they couldn't do Marauder. So as I say, the characters appeared again in New Mutants. I bought the issues at the time, didn't think much of it. And then they appeared in the Things series. This is how it says Black Marauder. And now they're back for the first time, the Fabulous Thunder Riders. Well, because that was Team America, but they couldn't use the name. This issue is from, well, it's cover dated September 1985 of the thing. And the funny thing is, I've never actually read this issue. I got it like at a cheap bin some years ago. And you can see the colors are sort of bright because at this point Marvel was using the flexographic process to sort of artificially brighten the things. Now the thing is, they're also wearing different uniforms too. They all have the same color, which kind of makes me wonder, were the costumes part of the were their uniforms part of the licensing agreement? Like Marvel couldn't do the the same costumes for them because they can't even call them Team America anymore either. There's the Marauder. Anyways, so I never read this issue, and maybe I should. I actually, for my article, I probably should read this and then have a opinion. Anyways, I'm trying to collect my thoughts about this article in defense of Team America. I don't think it's just nostalgia, but you never know. It might be. But for me, this 12-issue run, maybe you have to be 11 years old in 1981 or 82 to appreciate it like I did. I don't know. There were, like I said, I wasn't buying G.I. Joe back then, and that's something that other people really like. I bought like 2 issues of US1, which was the series that replaced Team America on the schedule, which was about a truck driver, and I didn't care for that series at all. So I don't know. I don't know what it is about Team America, but I really like them. So much so, in fact, that when I was in the early or in the mid 1980s, when I was like maybe about 15 or 16, I wrote up a whole bunch of plot ideas for volume 2 of Team America. And I still have some of the sheets somewhere, which would introduce some of the characters and things like that. Because I really thought there should be a volume 2, start over from number 1, and just keep going. But I didn't understand back then that it wouldn't be able to be called Team America because Ideal owned the rights. And maybe, who knows, they wouldn't be able to use the costumes either. So it's kind of unfortunate. But these issues are really cheap, and usually you can find them in cheap bins and things like that. And I recommend them if you're someone who is interested in genres other than superheroes, and just like like I said, like the Devlin cartoon from the early 70s, or even like things like Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. To me, it just had that kind of feel to it. Most of the issues are single story. One story issues. They're not like multi-part things and so forth. So that you can just pick up an issue and give it a try and see what you think. Am I crazy? I liked Team America, and I still do. Thanks for watching.